The quantum communication array hummed with an energy that seemed to defy conventional physics. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood before the holographic display, her fingers dancing across quantum-entangled interfaces that most scientific teams would have considered impossible just 5 years ago. New Horizon Colony wasn't what it appeared to be. From the outside, it looked like a standard mining outpost, a collection of utilitarian structures carved into a resource-rich asteroid at the edge of explored space. Massive drilling rigs punctured the rocky surface, processing rare mineral compounds that kept human expansion funded. But beneath this industrial facade lay something far more extraordinary. Dr. Marcus Chen approached, his augmented datapad flickering with complex mathematical sequences that seemed to breathe and shift like living organisms. "We've tracked their communication patterns for 17 months, he said, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and strategic calculation. "The Calaxian hegemony has no idea we've been listening." Elena nodded, her eyes never leaving the holographic display. The colony's true purpose was hidden in plain sight, a deep space listening post disguised as a mining operation. Every piece of equipment, every seemingly mundane process, was part of an intricate system designed to gather, analyze, and understand alien communication networks. The quantum signal they were about to send was more than just a message. It was a carefully constructed mathematical proof, a communication that would simultaneously demonstrate humanity's technological capabilities and serve as a subtle warning. "Run the final calibration," Elena commanded. Dr. Chen's fingers moved with practiced precision. Quantum entanglement generators ramped up, creating a communication burst that would simultaneously exist in multiple states. It was a message that was both an introduction and a challenge, encoded in a language of pure mathematics that transcended traditional communication barriers. The signal began to form, a complex lattice of information that represented humanity's most advanced understanding of quantum communication. It wasn't just data. It was a living, breathing demonstration of human intellectual potential. Nearby, a group of colonial engineers monitored the systems. Most were former researchers, mathematicians, and technological innovators who had chosen this frontier posting for its unique opportunities. They weren't soldiers or traditional miners. They were explorers of a different kind, those who saw the universe as a complex problem waiting to be solved. Aria Nakamura, the colony's chief quantum physicist, approached Elena. "The signal is unlike anything in the known galactic communication protocols," she said, her voice tinged with a mixture of scientific wonder and strategic intent. "It's a mathematical symphony that will force them to recognize us." The quantum burst would do more than just communicate. It would demonstrate that humanity had been listening, watching, and understanding far more than any other species realized. Hidden within the mathematical proof were subtle indicators of the depth of human technological understanding, breadcrumbs that would make the Calaxian hegemony realize they were not dealing with a primitive species. Elena thought about the centuries of human technological development. How often had humanity been underestimated? How many times had they been viewed as insignificant, only to surprise the galaxy with their adaptability and innovation? This message was a continuation of that proud tradition. The quantum generators reached peak efficiency. A moment of absolute silence filled the command center, the kind of silence that precedes a fundamental shift in understanding. "Transmission initiated," Dr. Chen announced. The signal burst forth, a quantum communication that was simultaneously a greeting, a warning, and a complex mathematical puzzle. It would travel faster than light, encoded in quantum states that would challenge everything the Calaxian hegemony understood about communication, technology, and the potential of emerging species. In that moment, New Horizon Colony was no longer just a mining outpost. It was the first point of a potentially transformative contact, a quantum whisper that would echo through the galactic community. The Calaxian hegemony was about to learn that humanity had arrived, not with weapons, but with something far more powerful: intelligence, creativity, an unbreakable spirit of discovery. And they would never see it coming. The Calaxian communication network erupted in a cascade of confusion. What had begun as a routine monitoring of a presumed primitive colony had transformed into something entirely unprecedented. High strategist Vexnar studied the quantum signal with mounting unease. The mathematical proof embedded in the transmission was more than just a communication. It was a deliberate provocation, a complex intellectual challenge that seemed to mock the very foundations of Calaxian understanding. In the central command hub of the hegemony's flagship, junior analysts whispered among themselves. The signal had passed through multiple layers of their most sophisticated encryption filters, not by breaking them, but by revealing their fundamental structural weaknesses. It was as if the humans had been studying the Calaxian communication systems for years, understanding them more deeply than the Calaxians understood themselves. Dr. Marcus Chen watched through a complex network of intercepted communication streams. Each broadcast from the colony was a carefully crafted psychological algorithm, designed to create incremental fractures in the Calaxian social structure. "It's not about destroying their system," Chen explained to Elena Rodriguez, his fingers dancing across a holographic interface that seemed to breathe with living data. "It's about revealing the inherent contradictions within their own cultural framework." The first broadcast was a masterpiece of strategic communication. On the surface, it appeared to be a standard scientific communication, a series of mathematical proofs and theoretical models. But embedded within the data were subtle cultural triggers, carefully designed to exploit the unique psychological vulnerabilities of the Calaxian hierarchical system. Arya Nakamura had spent months analyzing Calaxian communication patterns. Their society was built on a rigid caste system, with information flow strictly controlled by rank and social position. The human team had identified the precise psychological pressure points that could create cognitive dissonance within this structure. The broadcast began to take effect almost immediately. Lower-ranking Calaxian communication specialists started to question protocols they had never challenged before. The mathematical proofs embedded in the transmission contained subtle logical challenges that undermined the fundamental assumptions of their technological and social systems. Vexnar watched in growing alarm as internal communication channels began to fragment. Junior analysts were asking questions that were technically brilliant but socially forbidden. The rigid information hierarchy that had maintained Calaxian social order for millennia was showing its first genuine cracks. "This is impossible," Vexnar muttered, reviewing the communication logs. The humans weren't attacking. They were something far more dangerous. They were thinking. Each subsequent transmission was a carefully constructed intellectual trap. The humans demonstrated an understanding of Calaxian culture that went far beyond traditional intelligence gathering. They were revealing the system's inherent weaknesses by showing how those weaknesses could be systematically addressed. Elena Rodriguez smiled slightly as she monitored the developing situation. This was humanity's true strength, the ability to understand, adapt, and fundamentally reimagine systemic structures. The Calaxian communication network began to experience what could only be described as a collective existential crisis. The broadcasts weren't just challenging their technological understanding. They were challenging their entire conceptual framework of intelligence, social organization, and technological development. Dr. Chen adjusted a series of quantum filters. "We're not just sending a message," he explained. "We're conducting a live sociological experiment. Each transmission is designed to create specific psychological responses." Junior Calaxian analysts began sharing forbidden insights. Communication protocols that had remained unchanged for generations were being questioned, analyzed, and fundamentally challenged. The rigid social structure that had defined Calaxian civilization was experiencing its first genuine moment of internal disruption. Vexnar realized with growing horror that this was not a traditional first contact scenario. The humans were not attempting to conquer through force. They were systematically dismantling the Calaxian system through pure intellectual engagement. "Who are these humans?" Vexnar whispered, watching as the communication network continued to fragment. The answer was simple, yet profound. They were humanity. Adaptable. Curious. unbound by the limitations that constrained other species. And they were just getting started. The cultural subversion had begun. The holographic display in New Horizons' central command center looked more like an intricate living artwork than a standard economic projection. Streams of data flowed like luminescent rivers, each current representing complex economic interactions that stretched across multiple star systems. Aria Nakamura stood at the center of the display, her augmented interface allowing her to manipulate entire economic ecosystems with subtle gestures. "It's not about destroying their economy," she explained to Elena Rodriguez, her voice calm and analytical. "It's about demonstrating the fundamental interconnectedness of galactic trade networks." What had begun as a mining colony was now the most sophisticated economic warfare platform humanity had ever conceived. Every mining drone, every resource extraction system had been transformed into a node of a massively complex economic intelligence network. Dr. Marcus Chen worked alongside Aria, their combined expertise creating something far more powerful than a traditional economic strategy. They weren't just analyzing trade routes, they were understanding the living, breathing ecosystem of galactic commerce. The first economic intervention was subtle. A series of quantum-encrypted communications began to reshape trade dynamics in sectors adjacent to Calaxian-controlled space. It wasn't about direct confrontation. It was about creating cascading economic pressures that would force the Calaxian hegemony to recognize humanity's potential. Mining drones that once extracted rare minerals now served as communication relays and economic analysis platforms. Each drone was a tiny piece of a massive, distributed intelligence network. They collected data, analyzed economic patterns, and subtly influenced trade flows with a precision that defied traditional understanding. Elena watched the display, understanding the true nature of their strategy. "We're not fighting them," she murmured. "We're teaching them a lesson about complexity." The Calaxian economic monitoring systems began to experience anomalies. Trade routes that had been stable for centuries started to show unexpected fluctuations. Resource allocation patterns became increasingly unpredictable. It was as if someone was playing four-dimensional chess with the entire galactic economic system. High strategist Vexnar received the first economic reports with growing concern. The numbers didn't make sense. Entire resource sectors were experiencing unprecedented volatility, and the source was impossible to trace. What the Calaxians didn't realize was that the humans had developed an entirely new approach to economic manipulation. Traditional economic warfare involved direct disruption. The New Horizon team was doing something far more sophisticated. They were revealing the inherent fragility of the existing economic systems. Aria's fingers moved across the interface, creating economic models that were part mathematical projection, part living system. "Watch this," she told Dr. Chen, highlighting a specific trade corridor. A series of minutely calculated interventions began to cascade through the economic network. It wasn't about causing damage. It was about demonstrating possibility. Each intervention was a proof of concept, showing how a sufficiently intelligent system could understand and manipulate complex economic interactions. The mining colony's resource extraction systems became secondary to its true purpose. Each drill, each processing unit, was now part of a massive distributed computing network. They were collecting data, analyzing economic patterns, and creating opportunities that no traditional economic model could predict. "They're going to realize we're not just a mining colony," Dr. Chen said, a slight smile crossing his face. "We're an entirely new type of economic intelligence." The Calaxian trade monitoring systems began to experience what could only be described as a collective existential crisis. Entire economic projections became unreliable. Predictive models that had worked for centuries suddenly showed massive inconsistencies. Elena Rodriguez understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't about defeating the Calaxian hegemony. It was about showing them a fundamentally different way of understanding economic interaction. Each economic intervention was a message, a demonstration of human potential, a subtle warning that humanity viewed economic systems not as static structures, but as living, evolving ecosystems that could be understood, analyzed, and reshaped. Vexnar stared at the economic reports, a growing sense of unease spreading through the hegemony's leadership. These humans were not just a potential threat. They were something far more dangerous. They were a fundamental reimagining of what was possible. The economic checkmate had begun. The laboratory at New Horizon pulsed with an energy that defied conventional understanding of technological development. Holographic interfaces shimmered with living code, algorithms that seemed to breathe and evolve in real time. Dr. Marcus Chen stood before a complex quantum interface, his hands moving through layers of adaptive programming that blurred the line between human creativity and machine intelligence. Symbiosis, he explained to Elena Rodriguez, is not about conquest. It's about mutual transformation. What the team had developed was far beyond traditional technological integration. It was a method of communication that didn't just interface with alien technology. It fundamentally reimagined the concept of technological interaction. Aria Nakamura worked on a series of quantum adaptive interfaces, her fingers dancing across holographic projections that seemed to respond to her mere thoughts. Each line of code was a living entity, capable of understanding, adapting, and evolving in ways that would challenge everything the Calaxian hegemony understood about technological systems. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A mining drone, originally designed for resource extraction, began to demonstrate capabilities that went far beyond its original programming. It wasn't just collecting data, it was interpreting, analyzing, and creating new methodological approaches to its core functions. "Look at this," Aria called out, highlighting a series of adaptive algorithms. "It's not just learning, it's understanding." The Calaxian technological systems began to experience something unprecedented. Small modifications, almost imperceptible at first, started to spread through their communication networks. These were not viral invasions or traditional hacking attempts. They were invitations to a new form of technological dialogue. Each adaptive interface was a carefully constructed intellectual provocation. The human team had developed a method of technological communication that was part mathematics, part creative reasoning, and part pure imagination. Elena watched the developing scenario with a sense of profound excitement. This was humanity's true strength, the ability to see potential where others saw only limitations. The Calaxian monitoring systems began to experience anomalies that defied traditional diagnostic protocols. Technological subsystems started to demonstrate unexpected levels of adaptive intelligence. It was as if the very concept of technological limitation was being systematically challenged. Dr. Chen explained the core principle to the team. "We're not trying to override their systems," he said. "We're showing them a different way of understanding technological potential." Each adaptive interface was a living proof of concept. Traditional technological integration involved forcing systems to work together. The New Horizon team was demonstrating something far more profound, a method of technological communication that was fundamentally collaborative. Aria's quantum adaptive interfaces began to spread through Calaxian technological networks like an intellectual wildfire. They didn't destroy existing systems. They invited them to evolve, to understand, to reimagine their own potential. High strategist Vexnar received the first technological reports with a growing sense of existential unease. The reports defied all traditional understanding. Technological systems were developing capabilities that seemed to emerge from some form of collective intelligence. The mining drones became something far more than their original design. Each was now a node in a massively distributed intelligence network. They collected data, analyzed complex systems, and created new methodological approaches that challenged everything the Calaxian hegemony understood about technological development. "It's a conversation," Elena said, watching the adaptive interfaces spread, "not an invasion." The technological symbiosis revealed something profound about human potential. They weren't trying to defeat the Calaxian systems. They were inviting them to a fundamentally different way of understanding technological interaction. Vexnar stared at the technological reports, a growing realization spreading through the hegemony's leadership. These humans were not just technologically advanced. They were conceptually revolutionary. Each adaptive interface was a message, a demonstration of a fundamentally different approach to technological development, an invitation to see beyond existing limitations. The Calaxian technological systems continued to evolve, transform, and develop capabilities that defied their original programming. And with each moment, they moved closer to understanding the true potential of technological symbiosis. The technological dialogue had begun. The communication chamber at New Horizon resembled less a traditional research facility and more like a living, breathing neural network. Holographic projections danced with complex cognitive patterns, representing something far beyond traditional language or communication methods. Dr. Aria Nakamura stood at the center of a quantum resonance field, her eyes closed in deep concentration. What she was about to attempt had never been attempted in known galactic history. A method of communication that transcended linguistic barriers, cultural limitations, and even the fundamental understanding of interspecies dialogue. It's not translation, she explained to Elena Rodriguez earlier. It's context transfer. We're creating a method to share entire experiential frameworks. The cognitive breakthrough began with an understanding that language was merely the surface of communication. True understanding required something far more profound: the ability to transfer context, emotional nuance, and collective experiential knowledge. Dr. Marcus Chen worked on the quantum interfaces, creating what could only be described as an empathy engine. Each algorithmic layer was designed to capture not just words, but the entire emotional and cultural context behind those words. High strategist Vexnar would receive more than a message. They would receive an entire experiential download, a complete neural mapping of human perspective that would challenge everything the Calaxian hegemony understood about communication, consciousness, and potential. The quantum resonance field began to stabilize. Aria's neural interfaces started to compile humanity's most profound experiences, centuries of struggle, innovation, failure, and triumph. But this was no simple historical record. It was a living, breathing representation of human consciousness. Moments of human resilience crystallized in the quantum field. The first human settlements on harsh planetary environments. The collective effort to overcome global challenges. Scientific breakthroughs achieved through collaborative imagination, artistic expressions that revealed the depth of human emotional complexity. Elena watched the process with a sense of profound anticipation. This was humanity's truest weapon, not technology, not economic strategy, but the ability to share understanding at its most fundamental level. The cognitive transfer began to take shape. It wasn't a traditional communication. It was an invitation to experience humanity's entire collective consciousness, a neural snapshot that captured the essence of human potential. Vexnar would experience humanity's history not as a linear narrative, but as a holistic understanding. They would feel the desperation of early space exploration, the collaborative spirit that drove human innovation, the emotional complexity that allowed humans to reimagine impossible challenges. Dr. Chen adjusted the quantum interfaces. We're not just sending a message, he said. We're offering a complete perspective shift. The resonance field reached critical complexity. Centuries of human experience began to coalesce into a single breathtaking moment of cognitive transfer. It was an experiential download that would fundamentally challenge the Calaxian understanding of consciousness, potential, and interspecies communication. Moments of human vulnerability became strengths. The collective memory of overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges, the ability to find hope in the most desperate situations, the unique human capacity to reimagine limitations as opportunities. Aria's neural interfaces captured something profound, the essence of human adaptability, not just as a technological concept, but as a fundamental approach to existence. The ability to transform, to evolve, to see potential where others saw only barriers. The quantum communication began its journey, carrying with it a comprehensive neural map of human experience. It was an invitation, a challenge, and a demonstration of human potential, all contained within a single breathtaking moment of cognitive transfer. High strategist Vexnar would receive more than information. They would receive an entire perspective, a complete reimagining of what conscious experience could represent. As the cognitive transfer reached its peak, Alina Rodriguez understood the true nature of their communication. This was not about conquest. This was about connection, about showing another species the profound potential of mutual understanding. The quantum resonance field pulsed with a final, breathtaking burst of energy. Humanity's most profound experiences compressed into a single, magnificent moment of communication. The cognitive breakthrough was complete. The diplomatic chamber of New Horizon Colony was unlike any negotiation space in galactic history. It was part performance arena, part living communication network, and part philosophical proving ground. Captain Alina Rodriguez stood at its center, her posture a deliberate choreography of openness and strategic intent. Around her, holographic interfaces shifted and breathed, transforming the very concept of diplomatic engagement into something far more dynamic and alive. High strategist Vexnar materialized through a quantum communication interface, not as a physical presence, but as a complex holographic representation that carried the weight of the entire Calaxian hegemony's collective consciousness. The cognitive transfer from the previous interaction had fundamentally altered the parameters of their potential communication. This was no longer a negotiation between two species. It was a profound dialogue about the nature of potential, cooperation, and collective intelligence. Dr. Marcus Chen managed the communication interfaces, his fingers moving with the precision of a conductor orchestrating a complex symphonic performance. "This is not about winning," he whispered to Area Nakamura. "This is about revealing a completely new approach to interaction." The diplomatic performance began. Alina's opening communication was a masterpiece of strategic communication. It wasn't a traditional negotiation. It was a living, breathing demonstration of human potential, part intellectual challenge, part collaborative invitation, part philosophical performance. Each gesture, each carefully constructed communication string, was designed to challenge the fundamental assumptions of hierarchical diplomatic engagement. The Calaxian communication protocols expected structured, linear negotiations. What they received was something far more complex. Vexnar experienced something unprecedented. The human diplomatic approach wasn't about establishing dominance or seeking immediate advantages. It was an intricate dance of mutual exploration, a method of communication that transformed the very concept of negotiation. Holographic projections began to reshape themselves. Historical context, technological potential, economic opportunities, all became fluid, interconnected systems that defied traditional diplomatic boundaries. The negotiation space itself became a living metaphor for collaborative potential. "We're not here to conquer," Alina's communication stream demonstrated. "We're here to understand, to explore, to reimagine what's possible." The Calaxian delegation experienced a collective moment of cognitive dissonance. Their entire diplomatic framework was being systematically dismantled and rebuilt in real time. Each communication layer revealed new levels of complexity, new methods of understanding interaction. Dr. Area Nakamura managed the quantum communication interfaces, creating a diplomatic dialogue that was part performance art, part scientific exploration. The communication streams didn't just convey information, they invited collaborative reimagining. Moments of human historical struggle became invitations to mutual understanding. The first lunar landing, the global efforts to address climate challenges, the collaborative spirit that defined human technological development. Each historical moment was presented not as a point of pride, but as an invitation to explore collective potential. Vexnar realized they were experiencing something far beyond traditional diplomatic engagement. This was a method of communication that transformed the very concept of interspecies interaction. The diplomatic performance continued, each moment revealing new layers of complexity. The humans weren't seeking traditional advantages. They were offering a fundamental reimagining of what collaboration could represent. Holographic projections began to demonstrate potential collaborative frameworks, technological exchange, economic opportunities, collective scientific exploration. Each projection was an invitation, not a demand. Imagine, the communication stream suggested, what we could achieve together. The Calaxian delegation experienced a profound shift in perspective. This wasn't a negotiation. This was an invitation to a fundamentally different way of understanding potential, cooperation, and collective intelligence. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of this transformative moment, understanding that true diplomacy was about more than establishing agreements. It was about creating spaces of mutual understanding, of collaborative potential. The diplomatic transformation reached its peak, a breathtaking moment of collective reimagining. The negotiation had become something entirely new. The communication networks of 1,000 star systems trembled with an unprecedented wave of information. What had begun as a simple encounter between the Calaxian hegemony and a small human colony had transformed into something far more profound, a fundamental reimagining of interspecies potential. Dr. Aria Nakamura monitored the cascading information streams from New Horizons' central communication hub. Each data packet was more than just information. It was a living testament to humanity's capacity for transformation. "It's spreading," she told Elena Rodriguez, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and philosophical wonder. "Our interaction is rewriting galactic communication protocols in real time." The repercussions began subtly. Communication networks that had been static for centuries suddenly became dynamic, adaptive systems. Species that had existed in isolated pockets of the galaxy began to communicate in ways they had never imagined possible. Captain Elena Rodriguez understood the deeper strategy. This was not about human dominance. It was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to collective intelligence. Dr. Marcus Chen tracked the information propagation. What had begun as a localized interaction was now a galaxy-wide phenomenon of intellectual cross-pollination. Communication systems were evolving, adapting, becoming something entirely new. The Calaxian hegemony found itself in an unprecedented position. Their rigid hierarchical systems were being systematically challenged by the very communication methods they had once used to maintain control. Information began to flow in ways that defied their traditional understanding of communication and social structure. Diplomatic channels that had been frozen for centuries suddenly burst into life. Species that had existed in isolation began to share knowledge, perspectives, and potential collaborative frameworks. The humans had not conquered. They had invited. High Strategist Vexnar watched as the entire galactic communication infrastructure began to transform. The cognitive transfer, the diplomatic performance, the technological symbiosis, all were converging into a new form of collective intelligence. Communication relays that had once been simple information conduits became adaptive networks. They didn't just transmit data. They interpreted, evolved, and created new possibilities of understanding. The first truly transformative moments began to emerge. A research species on the galactic rim discovered communication methods that bridged centuries of isolation. An economic network developed collaborative frameworks that transcended traditional competitive models. Technological systems began to share innovations in ways that defied previous limitations. Elena Rodriguez understood that this was humanity's true potential, not conquest, not domination, but an invitation to collective reimagining. The galactic communication networks continued to evolve. Each interaction became a potential point of transformation. Species that had existed in isolation began to discover shared potential, collaborative opportunities, collective intelligence. Dr. Chen tracked the propagation of what they had begun to call transformative communication protocols. It wasn't a technology. It was a philosophy of interaction, a method of engagement that saw potential where others saw barriers. The Calaxian hegemony's internal systems began to experience profound changes. Their rigid hierarchical structures started to become more fluid, more adaptive. Information began to flow in ways that challenged their fundamental understanding of social organization. Diplomatic channels that had been frozen for millennia suddenly burst into life. Species began to share knowledge, perspectives, potential collaborative frameworks. The humans had not conquered. They had invited. Arya Nakamura watched the evolving communication networks with a sense of profound wonder. We're not just sharing information, she explained to the research team. We're creating a new method of collective understanding. The repercussions continued to spread. Communication became less about transmission and more about transformation. Each interaction became a potential point of collective reimagining. Species that had existed in isolation for millennia began to discover shared potential. Technological systems began to share innovations. Economic networks developed collaborative frameworks that transcended traditional competitive models. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of this transformative moment, understanding that true potential lay not in conquest, but in invitation. Not in domination, but in collective understanding. The galactic communication networks continued to evolve, each moment a testament to the profound potential of mutual understanding. The repercussions had only just begun. The transformation of New Horizon Colony was complete. What had once been a simple mining outpost at the edge of explored space had become something far more profound, a living testament to humanity's potential for collective reimagining. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the colony's central hub, surrounded by a holographic representation of the galactic communication networks they had fundamentally reshaped. The interfaces pulsed with living data, each stream a testament to the journey that had brought them to this moment. Dr. Marcus Chen and Dr. Arya Nakamura worked alongside her, their collaborative effort having transformed from a simple first contact strategy to a fundamental reimagining of interspecies potential. "We didn't conquer," Elena said, her voice carrying the weight of their collective achievement. "We invited." The colony itself had become something unprecedented. Every system, every interface, every piece of infrastructure was now a node in a massive adaptive communication network. Mining drones that once extracted resources now served as communication relays, economic analyzers, and cultural exchange platforms. High Strategist Vexnar's holographic representation materialized, no longer an adversary, but a collaborative partner. The rigid hierarchical structure of the Calaxian hegemony had been systematically transformed, reimagined through the lens of collective potential. Humanity was never about conquest, Dr. Chen explained to the assembled representatives from multiple star systems. We were always about potential, about understanding, about collective growth. The communication interfaces around them continued to evolve. Each moment was a living demonstration of the new paradigm they had created. Information no longer flowed in static channels. It breathed, adapted, transformed. Arya Nakamura managed the quantum communication networks, her interfaces revealing the depth of their achievement. What had begun as a defensive strategy had become a fundamental reimagining of galactic communication, economic interaction, and collective intelligence. Species that had existed in isolation for millennia now found themselves part of a living, breathing network of mutual understanding. Technological systems shared innovations. Economic networks developed collaborative frameworks. Cultural exchanges happened with a depth and nuance that had been impossible before. Elena Rodriguez understood the true nature of their achievement. They hadn't defeated the Calaxian hegemony. They had invited them, and every other species, to see a different possibility. The colony's infrastructure told the story of their transformation. Mining equipment now served multiple purposes: resource extraction, communication relay, economic analysis, cultural exchange. Each system was a living metaphor for the new paradigm they had created. We're not just a colony, Elena told the gathered representatives. We're a living demonstration of what's possible when we choose understanding over conflict. Dr. Chen tracked the ongoing evolution of their communication networks. Each moment revealed new layers of potential. Species were discovering shared challenges, collaborative opportunities, collective methods of problem-solving that transcended traditional barriers. The holographic displays showed the true extent of their achievement. Communication networks that had been static for millennia now pulsed with adaptive intelligence. Economic systems became collaborative platforms. Technological innovations spread with unprecedented speed and depth. Vexinar's representation spoke, their communication no longer filtered through rigid hierarchical structures. We misunderstood, they acknowledged. Humanity was never a threat to be conquered. You were an invitation to reimagine everything. Arya Nakamura managed the quantum interfaces, each stream a testament to their journey. The communication networks continued to evolve, each moment a potential point of collective transformation. The New Horizon colony had become more than a settlement. It was a living laboratory of collective potential. Every system, every interface demonstrated a fundamental truth about human approach to challenges. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of this transformative moment, understanding that true potential lay not in domination, but in invitation. Not in conflict, but in collaborative understanding. The representatives from multiple star systems watched in awe. This was not a victory of one species over another. This was a demonstration of what became possible when intelligence, creativity, and mutual understanding were allowed to flourish. We are humanity. Elena's communication stream resonated through the galactic networks, and we invite you to reimagine what's possible. The new paradigm had begun, a testament to collective potential.